So let's get started. Our first past paper, just to kind of gauge. We're actually doing an oldish one. Now, you're not going to be able to find the answers for this one on YouTube, right? So I picked one where you're not going to find the answers. So it's June 2014, right? And I want everyone to give this question a read. Now, when you're sending the answers, right? You don't, if you don't want to send complete sentences, I don't blame you, but at least one or two words, just summarize your answers. The send, I know typing can be a task. Now, if you're sending the answers, be real specific. If it's A you are answering, say A and then your answer. If it's B, let me know if it's part one and part two. I can't follow unless you're specific, right? Also, to make sure we're paying attention today, the first letter, write it down, is the letter B. That's to ensure you are paying attention. Everyone write it down. That's the first letter of the code today, the letter B. Get started, and I await your answers. So the first way is there are many answers, but I'm going to go with sharing needles, right? And this is pretty common among people, sorry, who do drugs, right? Like heroin and whatnot, or even cocaine and whatnot, right? When you're under the influence, you don't think too well, obviously. So people will inject themselves. They may have HIV, and the other person, the other drug addict, will borrow the same exact needle, which obviously will have some of the blood left over on the needle itself, and they will inject their cells with it, right? So that's one way, sharing needles. And vertical transmission. Now I use a kind of a fancy term there. Vertical transmission means it can be transferred from the mother to the child during pregnancy. So the mother could be infected with HIV, and while the child is developing in the womb or being born, the HIV from her blood gets into the baby's blood, right? So vertical transmission, I would prefer if you use that term in the exam, right? So for part B, name the cell, right, that is specifically targeted and destroyed by the HIV virus. Now, last week I gave you the answer for that one, right? I want you to be real. I know it's 1 mark, right? But it's a white blood cell that's destroyed. But there are many different types of white blood cells. The one I want you to remember for the exam is the CD4 plus cells, which is a type of lymphocyte. Now, there are two major categories of white blood cells, the lymphocytes or the phagocytes. The lymphocytes, which one is that? Is that the sophisticated one or the caveman one? In other words, does the lymphocyte analyze the virus and try to destroy it, or does it just go up to it and eat it? Right, he's a smart one, correct. He's the sophisticated one, right? So that's obviously when I'm teaching the past papers, I want to do revision, right? So I'll bring up things from the past. State 2 signs or symptoms of AIDS. Now remember, AIDS is not HIV. AIDS is kind of like the final or the aftermath of HIV. That's when enough blood cells are destroyed by the HIV virus, and now your body is open to anything. Any disease can kill you now when you have AIDS. So signs, remember, signs and symptoms are different. Signs can actually be measured or physically seen and investigated. Symptoms are things that the patient just says, but you can't actually measure it or directly see it. So two signs are swollen lymph nodes, or you get a rash, and symptoms, you get muscle aches or fatigue. Fatigue means you're what? Tired. Okay? Right? They have others, right? They have like rapid weight loss and whatnot, pneumonia, right? Right? So it have many different correct answers. They just asked me for 2, right? I put 4 on the screen, but there are many, many different answers. All right, so one here. All right. Right. So here's another one, right? It's about gonorrhea and syphilis, which are other types of STDs. Remember, HIV and AIDS is not the only STD out there. Right? What is that? Right. So I kind of start, even though they didn't ask you what venereal means, right? I'm just letting you all know. Right. The term venereal disease is associated with sexually transmitted infections like syphilis and gonorrhea, right? While HIV is primarily transmitted through sexual activity. You see, venereal means it means sexual activity. But gonorrhea and syphilis and HIV are venereal diseases, meaning that through sexual activity, you can acquire it, right? So what's going to happen is that people think, and we just learned from the last question, that HIV, right, is not only acquired through sexual activity. We just saw it can be acquired through what? Vertical transmission or even the sharing of needles. Both of those things don't have anything to do with direct sexual activity, right? So whenever it's good practice to stop saying that HIV is a venereal disease, because that gives you the idea that it can only be transmitted through sexual activity, which is not true. Everyone okay there, guys? Right? All right, so I'm gonna skip this one. All right. So the next slide here, I'm gonna quickly um just give you like a little summary of the HIV or AIDS and whatnot, right? So because I plan to do a little bit of revision here. How much of you all remember this table from last week? On how much of you all took this step to print out the notes, even though you didn't have to? How much of you all, well, some of you all might have remembered it. Different people are going to have different strategies, right? Some people might just download the slides and they just like having it on the phone, and every once in a while they open it. Not a problem. Some of you all might print it out, right? Great. So give the table a read, just to refresh your memory. Let's move on. Right, so here we have a table, right? I'm not going to ask you all to draw the table, but just give the question a read, and I'm going to show you how easy this is to actually do. Can everyone here from normal math class draw a bar graph? That's what, I remember from primary school, you would have to draw bar graphs as well, right? This is a simple, literally maths question that comes in HSB and integrated science. And it comes in biology as well. Right? But give it a read so you understand the graph when we find. So when people acquire, right, HIV, are they always going to die? But what do you all think about that? Remember last week I said no, right? And there were two reasons for it, right? Some people, when they get HIV, they live a normal life. The HIV doesn't affect them in any way. Those people, I guess, are lucky, right? But in a lot of people, the HIV virus is going to start damaging the white blood cells, right? It's going to start damaging the white blood cells, and eventually it's going to progress into AIDS. However, right, let's say that a person acquires HIV and the HIV begins to attack their white blood cells. There's a lot of treatment and medication you can take now. Probably 20 years ago, it didn't have it. But now it have medication that you can take so that you can still go about living a decently normal life. But you can still spread HIV, right? So if you're So you shouldn't have sexual activity, obviously, even if you're taking the medication, right? Now, the medication is obviously not going to be cheap, and the treatment is not going to be what? Cheap. So a country has to invest a lot of money into these types of programs, like to provide medication to the citizens and whatnot. So countries that have a very good hospital program or a good medical program, where they push a lot of money into it, the survival rate is obviously going to be what? Higher. And obviously, it will be lower in countries that don't invest a lot of money into their healthcare system, right? I'm going to show you all my answer here, right? I plot the graph for you all, right? Tell me if this makes sense here, right? I didn't put the name of the countries underneath, but I did it from first to last, right? The first one is the Bahamas. The next one is Barbados. In the exam, you're supposed to write in the countries underneath, right? But I don't know why I didn't. Look at my answer and let me know if it matches up, because we're supposed to plot this on the y-axis and the country on the x-axis. Do you think you all could have done this in the exam and walk away with 3 marks? I find you should give you more marks than that. I think something like this is supposed to be worth 5 marks. They were being stingy that year. Right? Look at it. It's no different from an SCA question. No different. All right? Let's move on. All right, so now you get now you get to answer some questions on it, right? Part 2 and part 3 is literally too easy. I'm not too sure why they included such easy questions, but I know you are not complaining. Send your answers across and we will continue. Obvious, right? Persons living with HIV, the highest, I think, is the clear answer here is what? Haiti, right? So I'm gonna write it in here. Which country has the lowest number of deaths? So we're using here. Lowest is who? It's Barbados, right? Right. Now, part 4. Let's see. The Bahamas and Cuba have almost similar persons living with AIDS. Let's look at Cuba and the Bahamas. Let me just highlight it here so we can better see it. Cuba, where the Bahamas, right over here. It seems that both of them have close values. Well, 660 and 710 is pretty close, right? So those are the amount of people living with HIV. But less people in Cuba develop AIDS than the Bahamas. Now, for those who know something about Cuba, Cuba is supposed to have some of the best doctors in the world. Well, so it goes, right? So the saying goes, right? Apparently, they invest a lot into their healthcare system. So I have a good feeling it has to do something with the healthcare system in Cuba being better than the Bahamas. So you want to answer kind of reflecting that, okay? Right? That's my answer there, and that will give you full marks in the exam, right? But once you suggest that Cuba has a better healthcare system or something around that, you're going to get your marks. And a lot of people did say that, something close to that, okay? Right? Give it a read, take a 10 seconds, and we will move. Right. The economy of some countries depend heavily on tourism. We know that in the Caribbean, right? A lot of countries depend on tourism. Can you call at least 2 countries in the Caribbean that depend heavily, like their economy? If tourism falls, the whole economy collapses. They're just 2 countries in the Caribbean. Trinidad is not one of them. Trinidad depends mostly right now on oil and gas. Tourism is not at the top of the list. I don't think it's Jamaica, right? But the Bahamas definitely, and Barbados, right? And countries like St. Kitts and Nevis. Those countries depend heavily on tourism, right? Don't get me wrong, Jamaica has a strong tourism industry, but I don't think most of their money comes from that, as far as I know. Okay, and St. Vincent, definitely, Grenada, right? Those countries depend on tourism. So let's think about this from our perspective. Let's say that you here, I just saying, right? I use an example. I don't mean to, if anybody's from Grenada here, right? I'm just saying if. Let me just say that one day you heard that Grenada is having an AIDS epidemic. So a lot of the population has HIV and AIDS. Would that affect your decision to visit Grenada? Would that affect your, and say, stay there for a few months? Would that affect your decision? Yes, right? It will affect your decision. Now, we know that AIDS cannot be transmitted. Let me say you go by the hotel and you order a drink and you hold, let me say somebody has HIV and they hold your glass and give you a glass. We know, or somebody gives you a napkin or whatever, but they touch the napkin. We know HIV and AIDS is not spread by those methods, but paranoia will kick in, right? There's something that kicks in saying, oh God, that person has HIV, that person has AIDS. I don't want to touch nothing them touching, right? And it's irrational, but it happens a lot in society, okay? So the truth is, HIV will affect tourism. It will, right? So this is my answer for it. Give it a read, but it basically says, yes, it will affect a person's perception of that particular country. All right. Let's have a. So the slide above that, right, and whatnot. So, all right. So let's see what the mouse is saying here, right? Oh, by the way, let me give you all our next letter to ensure that we are paying attention. The next letter is X. So everyone write down the second letter for today. It's X. All right, so let's see what the mouse is saying here. So Jimmy, can you list 5 ways diseases can affect a country? I know I did this last week with you all, right? Diseases can seriously affect a country. Now, I'm not asking you how you say, type back all the reasons. You could summarize each method with 2 words or something like that, or 1 word, okay? So let's go ahead. Let me shoot, guys. 5 ways diseases can affect a country. What in here? Right. So these are the 5 reasons here. Let's go. Right, so we kind of be moving away now to question 2, June 2014, question 2. That's right, we only did 1 question so far, but the only reason the one question took so long is because we were doing revision in between. All right, so don't get scared and think, oh God, so long to do 1 question, right? I await your answers. Good luck for this slide. A is just simply the nucleus, right? That's the nucleus of the cell. Remember, the nucleus is like the boss of the cell. He tells everybody what to do. Okay, that's the nucleus of the cell, right? All right, so for part B, right? Now, this one here is only for the biology students, right? Now, I made a slight mistake, right? For people who are doing biology and HSB only, right? The endoplasmic reticulum, right? So what's going to happen? Some people mixed it up now. They had A switched with B. So you need to check that there, right? Right, so that I was asking someone to check their answers there. They had it mixed up, okay? Now, for the integrated science people, don't feel bad if you didn't get that one correct. For the integrated science people, that is not going to come, okay? Right? And remember, this is an old past paper. This is June 2014. The questions have gotten way easier now, right? Sorry, I picked an old past paper, but I needed to pick one where you couldn't find the answers on the internet, right? So most likely for people who write in the new exams, they're not going to ask you about the endoplasmic reticulum, all right? Oh, let me erase these arrows here. Right. So part 2. State one function of each of the organelles labeled C and D. All right. First of all, well, what do you all think C is? I should ask that first before you start to say the function of C. What is C? Right, Daniel, correct. No, Ezekiel, check it back, check it back. C is your chloroplast, right? Remember, this is a plant cell. Now, I know what you all are thinking, right? You go in 10 different textbook and the diagram looks what? Different, right? And I don't blame you, unless it's a colored diagram, which is not going to happen in CXC, right? It's always going to be a black and white diagram, right? Okay. C, usually in color, will be green. It will be kind of darkish or brightish green. But the point is, it will be green. Green, the C is going to be your chloroplast. D is going to be your mitochondria. And it's real easy to figure out the mitochondria. It does look like a potato and it will have little lines in it like this. So you can't miss it now, even if it's a real terrible drawing. You can't miss the diagram of the mitochondria. It just have the little lines inside of it. Or sometimes they will draw it like this. They'll draw it like squiggly lines like this. Okay? So you can't miss the mitochondria. And don't feel too bad. In school, I used to mix it up too. Not because I didn't know the difference. It's because CXC, honestly, sometimes they just draw some real terrible diagrams, right? And you're going to meet up some more today. Terrible diagrams. Okay? So what's the function of C? C, the chloroplast. This contains a green pigment name, I spelled name wrong, sorry about that, called chlorophyll, which absorbs light, which is needed for what? Photosynthesis. Remember, plants create their own food by a process called photosynthesis, but it requires sunlight. So the chlorophyll, which lives in the chloroplast, will absorb the sunlight. And what's the function of D? Nobody is supposed to get D wrong. The mitochondria, they create energy via a process called respiration. Okay, right? So other than this answer here, other than this one, how much of you all think you would have gotten the remaining 3 marks? You would have gotten 3 out of the 4 marks there. Be honest with me. I mean, this is feedback, right? This is for me to gauge you all today, right? Right. All right, let's go. B. Well, give it a read. You are required to view a virus and a typical plant cell underneath a microscope. Now, let me just clear this up one time. A virus and a plant cell are completely different, okay? First of all, a virus is considered to be not alive. Remember, according to science, a virus is not living. A plant cell is considered living, all right? So that's for starters. I hope it helps you with the rest of your answer. Identify one feature that is common to both a virus and a typical plant cell. Now, there are more than one correct answers, right? But this is the one I choose. And if you go in any textbook, like if they list a few similarities between a virus and a typical plant cell, you will see DNA at the top of the list. So both of them will have what? DNA. You can be real sure about that, right? Two, suggest two differences that would be observed between a virus and a plant cell. But these are the two I came up with. Plant cells have chloroplast. I guarantee you a virus does not have chloroplast. Remember, plants needed to do what? Trap sunlight so it can perform photosynthesis. And a mitochondria. A virus does not have mitochondria. Okay? So we're just going to talk about this slide in a little bit more detail. Like I said, there are more than one correct answers, right? Right. Now, oh, sorry, I'm just going to move on. We'll move on to it just now, right? Where I have a slide prepared that shows you the key differences between a virus and a typical plant or animal cell. On the screen here, Figure 3 shows 3 different types of cells found in the human body. Name the cell labeled Y. Well, what do you all think? Now, some of you all are going to get this one correct, and some of you all are not. The reason is, this cell, I'm supposed to start this topic next week. But for those who have a general idea from school, what's the name of that particular type of cell? Right? Asia, correct. Naveed, correct. Durga, correct. Luke, correct. Ezekiel, correct. Right? Cell Y, it has something to do, I'll give you a hint. It has something to do with pain. Not everything to do with pain, but it has something to do with pain. Like if you pinch yourself, you just feel the pinch. Why, when you pinch yourself, you just feel a pain? What helps transmit or alert your body of pain? A nerve cell, correct. So I made a mistake there, right? This answer is supposed to be, right? Now I'll explain something, right? Some people are going to call it a nerve cell. The correct word is neuron cell. I don't think they will give you marks if you put nerve cell. But when we start the topic, you're going to realize that there's a slight difference between the word nerve and the word neuron. But for the time being, I will accept the word nerve cell as correct. But the proper word is neuron, right? And all these types of cells here, right? Oh, part 2. Are the cells in figure 3 classified as differentiated or undifferentiated? Right? Right. These types of cells are classified as differentiated. I'll just give you a little summary of it. Oh, by the way, someone said that the tail is missing from the nerve cell. Yeah, you are right. The tail is missing. Like I said, sometimes they forget when they're doing diagrams in CXC. They don't draw the diagrams properly, right? But the tail is missing in the diagram that they drew. So let me explain the difference between differentiated and undifferentiated cells. I will give you something you can relate to. Let's say that you have a job to do to build a building. Let me say you want to build a building, right? There are many different types of jobs that are needed to build a building. You all know what a general worker is. Like you hire someone, but that person doesn't really have a specific job. Whatever you tell him to do, he will try his best to do it. It's like somebody who brand new. You now hire him, and he ain't too sure how to build a building. This is like his first job in the world. Can you all imagine that? That a person, for the first time in their life, they're working, and they're going on the building site. And they're basically clueless about everything. So they're waiting on orders. They're waiting on the boss to tell them what to do. Like pick up a brick. Hey, go get some water to mix with the cement, right? So it's almost like an assistant or somebody who just doesn't know what to do. I would classify that person as undifferentiated, right? Undifferentiated is a type of cell that doesn't quite know what it's supposed to be in life or what it's supposed to do. However, over time, if you leave that same person in the workplace for 10 years, let me say you fast forward and they come back 10 years, do you think that person is still going to be the same person? Hopefully, he's not a clueless person. Don't you think he might be specialized in something after 10 years? Like when he come back 10 years later, he might be the engineer. He might be the person, like the steel engineer or metal engineer. Anything that dealing with metal, he is the man you need to ask. Or he might be the drainage engineer. Anything to do with drainage, he's the man to talk to, right? So differentiated cells are specialized cells that are really good at doing one thing or two things or a few things, right? But let's keep it at one. So you see things like a sperm cell. A sperm cell has a specific function. It deals with what? Sexual reproduction, right? That's its main purpose in life, okay? A neuron cell is a specific cell that deals with transmitting what? Signals like pain, right? And this here is what? A white blood cell. He is specialized. He is to deal with what? Destroying bacteria or viruses or invaders that are coming into the body. Now, not all cells in your body are specialized. It have undifferentiated cells or non-specialized cells, cells that doesn't know what it wants to be in life as yet. All right. Anybody can give me an idea, an example of an undifferentiated cell in your body? A cell that doesn't know what it wants to be in life as yet. It's like almost like it really have no purpose yet. It starts with S. It's only already one example on the syllabus. It starts with S. Kiara, correct. Not sperm cells. We said sperm cells are specific. They can't be sperm cells. Sperm cells have a specific function. The answer, y'all ever heard this term? Stem cells. You ever hear about stem cell research? Stem cells in your body are not specialized cells. They don't know what they want to be as yet in life. Don't get me wrong. Some stem cells, they leave them long enough, they will turn into a sperm cell. They will turn eventually into a neuron cell or a white blood cells. But for the time being, They don't know what they will be as yet. Okay? Don't worry, next week when we start this topic in full, you're going to hear me repeating all of these things. Okay? But think of today as a little introduction. Right. So just now we spoke about a virus, right? We learned that a virus is different, is not alive. And we learned that a virus is different from a plant or animal cell. But what about the difference between a virus and a bacteria? A virus and a bacteria are definitely different. Is a bacteria considered to be alive? What do you all think? Is a bacteria considered to be alive? The answer is yes. Bacteria is considered to be alive. So let's have a little diagram here. Now, I'm not going to ask you to memorize everything in these diagrams, right? It's just some basic things I want you to discuss. So, someone mentioned this already. A virus needs a host to reproduce. And viruses are normally smaller than bacteria, right? So I think you all know this already. A virus cannot really survive too long outside a body. Like when you sneeze, if you have a virus in your system and it gets airborne, that virus to reproduce or to survive or pass on its genes, it needs to land on and live in somebody else, okay? Otherwise, it dies out. It's unable to reproduce and whatnot. Bacteria do not need a host. In other words, bacteria can live outside your body. It doesn't need to mooch off anybody, right? But here's the amazing thing, right? About a bacteria. Look in this diagram of a bacteria. Do you see any mitochondria, right? Do you see any mitochondria in that bacteria? The answer is no, right? So I want to clear up something. Respiration. Respiration is how an organism creates what? Energy. I think we could all agree with that, right? That's common knowledge. But a lot of people think that the only way to create energy is via a mitochondria. I'm just here to clear this up. That is not true. Okay? There in nature, there are different ways of creating energy or performing respiration. A mitochondria is just one way of doing it. Now, a bacteria, like I said, doesn't have a mitochondria. So how does it create energy? Now, how it creates the energy is way off the syllabus. You just need to know, just for general information purposes, is that the bacteria has a different mechanism other than mitochondria to produce what? Energy, right? Also, do you all notice that that a bacteria doesn't really have a nucleus? You all notice that? You all see any nucleus inside here? There's no nucleus in a bacteria, no? Like how a plant and animal cell has a nucleus. A bacteria really doesn't have a nucleus. And in case you're from doing the homework, let me say this is the nucleus. Who can tell me what lives inside the nucleus? Everyone should know the answer for this now. Like if you go in a plant or animal cell and you look inside the nucleus, what will you see inside of there? I'll give you a hint. It have two answers. I'll accept any one. One starting with D and the other one starting with C. Right? Any one of the answers I will accept. Right. Inside the nucleus, it have the chromosomes or the DNA, better known as the genes, right? So DNA and chromosomes, any one of those answers I will accept. Now, in a normal cell, like a plant or animal cell, the DNA or chromosomes live inside of the nucleus. But in a bacteria, there's no nucleus. So guess what? The DNA, he is free to move around. He's not confined to the boundaries of the nucleus because there is no nucleus. So in other words, the DNA or chromosomes, they just swim around inside of the bacteria. No care in the world. Okay? Right. In our first class, right? Do you all remember this diagram? I think it was in September. How much of you all remember this diagram? It should be, I remember telling you all that you all will not have time to draw it in class, but you were supposed to take a screenshot and draw it in your books. That was last year, September, right? It should be somewhere in your notes, right? All right, so let's move on. Here's another question. Good luck. Send your answers, please. I believe on the first day of class, and it's usually one of the first things any teacher does do, right? There, for something to be classified as living, right? For something to be classified as living, it has to do 7 things. You all remember the acronym I gave you all? I know different teachers give you different acronyms, but my one was Mrs. Gren, right? They only asked me for 3, but I put 4 here. All living things must display movement. All living things must what? Must be able to create energy, which is respiration. All living things must display sensitivity. Sensitivity means if you interact with it, it will interact back. Like even plants, right? If you know, some plants, when you touch it, the leaves just close. So sensitivity means you react to the environment. You all ever notice that plants is grow towards the sunlight? It is react to the environment. And nutrition. All living things need some form of nutrition, right? And there are 3 others, right? But they just ask me to list 3. I list what? 4. However, have you all ever heard the argument, right? I really dislike this argument, right? But to me, it's pretty silly in my head, right? Is a fire alive? Is a fire on the ground alive? Yes or no, right? And up to now, philosophers still think about and discuss this question. How about this, right? I could argue that a fire is alive. Let's take my 4 things, right? I know it have 7 things, but let's just take 4, just for argument's sake. Does a fire move? Does a fire move? Yes. Okay. So somebody could say, hey, a fire is alive, you know, any flame moving? And you'll say, all right. Respiration. Is a fire energy or have energy or be able to create energy? Yes. A fire is heat energy. You can't disprove that, right? A fire is energy itself, right? Okay. So then you say sensitivity. Does a flame react to the environment? I could say, yeah, when the wind blow and the flame is moving in the direction of the wind. So it reacts to the environment. And at this point, you start to get frustrated with me. You say, all right, what about nutrition? Fires don't eat. But I could beg to differ, right? If a fire doesn't eat food, but a fire could eat what? Gas. You give it gas and it grows bigger, right? And a flame can grow. You can give it diesel or wood or paper, and it consumes that as fuel and it grows larger. I could go on and on. You will never win the argument, right? That you can never disprove that a flame is dead because it displays everything that a living thing has. The only argument I could come back is this. This is the only way you'll get around with this. Scientists also only consider something to be alive if it has a cell in it. A flame does not have a cell. If you put a flame underneath a microscope, you will not see individual cells. Please memorize that for the exam, right? Because that's the only way right now we are able to disprove that a flame is not alive. All right? or what I call the next letter to ensure we're paying attention in class. The next letter is the letter Y. Write it down, the letter Y. So A is the liver. Now, there are many different correct answers, right? But the liver, one of the main functions is the liver. It's a nice filter in the body, right? It removes toxins from the body. Also, another correct answer is that it produces bile. So that will also be correct, which was the most popular answer. So, right? The esophagus, right? You know, when you chew food and you swallow the food, right? There's a big tube that goes from your mouth to your stomach. Well, the purpose of that tube is to help deliver the food to your stomach. Okay, so I think I didn't really see any wrong answers, so that was pretty reassuring, right? Great. Let's move on, right? Pretty standard stuff here. Right, this one is talking about the pancreas. Okay, good luck. So name one food group whose digestion would be affected. All right, so we had to try to figure out the pancreas. Remember, it has what? Three types of digestive enzymes, right? There are three types of digestive enzymes. There is carbohydrates, protease, and lipase. Which one does the pancreas create? Does it create carbohydrates, which digest carbohydrates, or does it produce protease, which digests proteins, or does it produce lipase, which digests fats? Kiara, correct. Right. Any answers, Kasim? Kasim Nottingham, any answers? One answer might be nice for the entire class, Mr. Kasim. It would be nice. Some people are getting, Kasim, here what, leave. Leave my class. You're not paying attention, leave, I'll talk to your parents after. You're really not paying attention. So leave and we'll talk. Go do whatever what you was doing. Right. So some of y'all fell for the trick. The pancreas creates all three types of sorry, what do you call it? Digestive, right? It creates all three types of digestive enzymes. So that means the pancreas, if the pancreas gives problems, right? That means you're going to have problems digesting carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Now, I know these types of questions, right? It's made to trick the student into thinking that the pancreas only creates one type of digestive enzymes, right? When in fact, the examiners try to figure out, hey, does the student really know it's a super important organ, right? And so, in other words, you might think it only have one answer here, but no, it have three answers that are considered to be what? Correct. Name one food group whose digestion will be affected. You could call carbohydrates, you could call proteins, and you could call what? Fatty acids. Okay? And any one of them will be correct. Now, obviously, when I put the answer, I might only put what? One. I put proteins. But for those who said carbohydrates, you have it correct. For those who said fats, you have it correct. Okay? So you don't have to worry. Part 2, right? Someone asks about fried foods. Yeah, I guess if they said fried foods, I guess that would insinuate that you're talking about fats. So yeah, I would give you correct that in the exam, right? If you said sugars, I would still give you it correct because sugars is a form of what? carbohydrates. So I would still give you that correct. Or carbs or carbohydrates or whatever. Don't use the word carbs. Examiners hate when you abbreviate carbohydrates to carbs. Please don't do that in the exam. Please, please, please don't do that. Right? Right. 2, state one effect that a deficiency of a food group, name in one. So my answer for part 1 was proteins. So my answer for part 2 has to be reflective of my answer of proteins. So if a person cannot digest proteins, well, I know for sure proteins are needed for building muscle and repairing tissues. So I know muscle tissue will not be able to repair itself properly, right? Also, I don't know if you all know this, right? Tell me if you all were aware of the things in green. Let me know if you all are aware of the things in green. That a lot of people think protein only deals with muscles, right? But here's another thing. Proteins are actually used to make enzymes and hormones. Every enzyme and every hormone in your body needs proteins to make antibodies. Remember, antibodies do what? Don't they, how you say, destroy bacteria and keep you healthy, right? 3. Well, I think 3 is obvious that if you get a cut or a wound, for the tissue to heal itself, you need what? Proteins. I think that one is obvious. And I mentioned this one. Your first go-to, when it comes to energy, your first go-to is carbohydrates. But let's say you're low on carbohydrates. What your body will do, it will take fat and convert it into what? Energy. But let's say carbohydrates and fats run out in your body, like you're on a deserted island. Your body will start to break down its own muscle, its own proteins, and convert it to energy, which is what you really don't want to happen. Your body begins to eat itself alive, right? So let's go. Right, part C, good luck. It has 2 parts, sir. It might not be obvious, but one is quite down here. You'll see part 1, and this is part 2. Enzymes are very sensitive to temperature. Whenever our body temperature is about what? 37 degrees Celsius, roughly, right? It's about 37 degrees Celsius. So enzymes obviously survive at that temperature. They love that temperature. If you are an enzyme, 37 degrees Celsius is your favorite temperature. However, whenever your body goes up to, when it crosses around 42 degrees Celsius, remember, if you get a fever and the fever is too high and it is need to rush you to the hospital, that is because, you see, above 42 degrees Celsius, you see around that temperature, it starts to destroy the enzymes, okay? It starts to destroy the enzymes. So you could be real sure. You see the one, this water bath is at 37 degrees Celsius. Look at test tube 2. Test tube 2 is starch. Now, starch is a type of carbohydrate plus boiled amylase. By that phrase alone, do you think that the amylase is going to survive in test tube 2? Definitely not, right? So test tube 2, because it was boiled, that means at 100 degrees Celsius, that destroyed the amylase long time. So the starch will not be digested. It will not be able to break down the starch, okay? I have a feeling test tube 3, test tube starch plus water. Now, they're trying to say in test tube 3, you put starch and water alone. It have no what? Amylase. You think water could break down starch? No, right? I got, you know what is real starchy? A cassava. If you put cassava in a bathtub of water, will anything amazing happen? No. When you come back, it's still a piece of cassava because water cannot by itself break down starch. However, I have a good feeling test tube 1 is the one that will break down the starch because it's amylase at the correct temperature and you put starch in it. It will break down the starch. It will help digest what? The starch, right? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at my answers and let's see if everything I said there makes sense. And also I have a little table here reminding you about everything you need to know about enzymes. Okay. Give everything a read. This is the last question we're doing, but give it a read. Don't leave us yet.